The lift. The iron of the balustrade was hot in the sun. Just a brief look at the appointment note, number 159. He felt his tie for a moment and jumped 2 steps at a time up the steps to the entrance. Another gentleman who came out politely held the door open and blew. From the coolness inside, it was a transition to the outside. 7th floor. The doors creaked open. Gee, they could do with a little better maintenance. It's the impressions that play a part, perhaps subconsciously. Is it clean? Do they have their affairs in order? Anyway, this was a multi-company building that was clearly more than half empty. And just before the door closed, someone else stepped in. A presence that was quite noticeable. Without really looking, the beautiful long hair stood out, and he felt a pair of eyes take him as he pressed the button on the 7th. Nothing. Press again. Sure enough, something happened. The lady pressed 8, a neatly groomed hand. It was already rattling when the cubicle started to move. Those conductors are just broken, he thought. The acceleration was palpable, not in a more normal way. He looked at the lady, who also made a somehow surprised face. In an instant they realized this wasn't going well. The elevator hurtled upwards and wouldn't stop. And before they could speak, there was a bang, and they rocketed up, only to come crashing down again. Hypothermic. The man raised an eyebrow. The lady rubbed her knee, and in a flash he saw beautiful curves. What have we here? She said with a little strange accent. Without saying anything, the man tried to see between the crack of the door. He tapped it once. We are struck at the top of the elevator room. And he pressed the button from the intercom. Nothing. They looked at each other and looked at each other. He could be locked up with worse company. I'm going to call. But via the lift company and another 5 phone calls, the message came that a technician could wait a few more hours. Try the emergency hatch, was the advice. The hatch was in the ceiling. I give you a support, then you'll see if it will open, he suggested. Do you like that? She asked doubtfully. His eyes answered. She grabbed his shoulder and put one foot on his hands, her belly against his face, and her smell into his nose. He suddenly forgot about the stuck elevator. She rumbled something over his head and muttered, well, so it didn't work. The hatch didn't open. She stepped down, and he held her. She stood a bit unsteady, and so they suddenly stood against each other, face to face. There were no sparks. There was high voltage immediately. She realized they'd been here for a while, standing still against each other. She didn't back down, but stood there, seconds, minutes, and as naturally they kissed, if they had to, probing, exploratory, and then followed their hands. At first with hesitation, but gradually more bold. Sometimes a look of, "What are you doing?" and then immediately another bout of lust. It was clear where this was going. The smart business attire was peeled open and the lady stood with her back against the elevator wall, leaning on the banister. He had one arm over her head and bit into her flesh, found her breasts, sank his teeth deep into the flesh. A moment later she dropped to her knees and she took the paysan between her lips. It ruffed her hair and grabbed her as the point approached, turning her against the banister. With a sigh she melted together as he buried himself deep inside her, and her pleasure was clearly audible. They tightened and pressed against each other almost simultaneously. When they came to their senses, they smiled shyly at each other and kissed. "It may take a while," he said, with a twinkle in his eye. She grinned slightly, didn't know what to say quickly, but began to tidy herself up again. There was a sound of metal scraping metal below them, and voices came. "Yes, we're still here," she cried. When the doors finally opened again, two well-dressed business people stepped out, exchanging a look.